beside me, Mr. Farage, is a man who was very much against the triggering of Article 15. He's John Nicolson. He's a former SNP MP. He's also a talk radio presenter. And I think you called him one of the traitors.
Traitors, yes.
Traitors for doing so.
I was one of Nigel Farage's traitors. So, well, of course, it doesn't really matter who the Prime Minister is, because the problem with all of this is Brexit itself. You know, these hardline zealots like Nigel Farage and his cronies.
But Nigel still wants to be friends with Europe when he exits.
Gave us the only French thing about Nigel is his name, of course. What they wanted to do was constantly tell us that there was some magical deal on the horizon. That was never going to happen in a million years. Remember, the Germans were going to give us a fabulous deal because they wanted to sell cars to us. The 27 were going to fall apart. Remember, Nigel promised that. The 27 would all disintegrate. What has happened is entirely predictable. They've remained united. They've remained resolute. And what we've seen is what we were always going to see at this juncture, the weakness of one country's position against a unified 27.
But John, a lot of people would say it didn't have to be that way. We are the second strongest economy within the European Union, for instance. Why didn't we show some muscle instead of following? Why weren't we leading? Why weren't we up there?
We were playing our best cards, but
that's the best we could do.
I'm afraid so. Our card just wasn't our hand wasn't as strong as the Brexiteers promised. This is reality, Donny.
Is that the reality, Nigel?
You know, it's very interesting to listen to all these people who've never actually, in most cases, worked in business or understood what a negotiation is. I've been in the European Parliament now for getting on 20 years, and ever since 2001, when I first had this debate with Neil Kinnock, when he was back then a commissioner, and on through Giscard d'Estaing, the former French president, and dozens of others, they've all said the same thing. If you want to leave the European Union and have a simple free trade agreement, we're happy to do that. The problem is we haven't asked for it. And I thought Mrs. Merkel's comment this week was really interesting when she said Mrs. May wants to stay part of Europe. Well, absolutely. We've tried to opt back in to large parts of it. We finished up with a mess. We finished up with something that is a complete betrayal, not just of the Brexit vote, but of the way 85% of people voted in the last general election. This is actually very easy. You know, it's very easy. We say to Brussels, look, if you want a free trade deal, we're grown-ups. We'll do that with you. If you don't, we'll leave on WTO rules. It's quite simple, because nothing other than those two options satisfies the demand for independence, which is what we voted for.
This is pub chat. It always sounds very good with your mates down at the Billericay Dog and Duck. It's all really simple, all this stuff, you know. But when it all falls apart is when you're not talking to your Brexit UKIP chums, but when you're actually there staring at Michel Barnier over a table and he's massively well briefed and you don't have many cards to play. You know, I remember being in the Bundestag and talking to the Germans, and they said to me at the time, your ministers don't seem to realise how weak their hand is. Our car manufacturers bit the bullet and they realised that it was going to hurt German car manufacturing, but they'd signed up for the European project and they just thought they tolerated the hurt that it took. And the same will be true of this Brexit deal. I mean, obviously, it's going to cause some hurt amongst the 27, but they're united, they've signed up for it, and they've realised and always said you can't cherry pick. You can't have free trade without free movement of people, and God knows we need free movement of people.
Rubbish.
Nigel's saying rubbish.
Rubbish. Can we stop this?
Facts are always upsetting.
Canada's just done a free trade deal with no free movement of people, with no jurisdiction from the European Court of Justice, and without having to pay vast sums of money. Either you have a simple trade relationship or you're members of political union. The Brexit vote was for us to leave political union to become an independent country. This is actually very, very simple. It needs leadership. It needs courage. It needs the acceptance. There may be short-term bumps in the road, but we've made an historic decision, and we must stay with it. And, you know, I've been there this week, John, and I've listened to Angela Merkel talking about a full, true European army, about a foreign policy without veto, about expansion to the east. Everything since that Brexit vote tells us we made the right decision.
But, Nigel, a lot of people listening will be thinking, and maybe the idea is to get them thinking this way, did they actually make the right decision? There is a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty. A lot of people, if they could turn back time, maybe they would do it differently. You stand resolute. You look at the future.
Maybe they wouldn't. Come on, you can argue that all around the houses. We voted for this twice, Eamon, in a general election as well. Let's be clear about that.
So, John, do you think if we went back and we had the so-called people's vote or whatever, and people are thinking, oh, well, people will change their minds, the political authorities think, right, people are going to change their mind because they're slightly frightened, they've got a glimpse of what the future might be like. Nigel's saying it might even be a bigger vote to get out because people are insulted by the way they have been treated by the Barniers and the Junckers.
If that was the case, of course, all the Brexiteers would be desperate for a second vote because they know they would close down the debate for a generation. The reason that they're so they're so feared of a second vote is because they know they'd get thumped in a second vote because they made all sorts of unrealistic promises. And so what we're now seeing is the best deal. So I think it should be put to the country. I think it should be put to the people. And if
in
Nigel,
the form of a general election?
No, a referendum.
A
referendum. The Tories are not going to vote for a general election. The DUP don't want a general election because they're terrified of a Corbyn government. So I don't think a general election is immediately on the cards. But I think if politics and politicians fail to resolve an issue as they failed to resolve this, I think what you do is you put it to the people and give the people a say. Do you think that the politicians have delivered what the Brexiteers told us Brexit would deliver? Or do you think we'll get a better deal staying in Europe? Because, of course, Nigel will say if he'd been in charge, it would have been so easy. But every single one who's been put... I know we heard you, Nigel. Every single one who was put in charge of negotiating... he's losing his temper now. Because you lose the argument, you lose your temper. You start shouting.
Okay, let's give Mr. Farage.
If you're telling me in a referendum I get to vote to remain... or to have Mrs. May's deal been stuck in perpetuity in a customs union, I wouldn't vote. That doesn't give us an option of any kind at all. We have voted twice decisively to leave the European Union. And if that is not honoured, it is not only a betrayal of democracy, it actually endangers the trust in this country between the governors and the governed. This needs to be delivered. And to have these crooked ideas that it's either Mrs. May's deal or remain, literally, I would stay at home.
The problem, of course, is that for Nigel and his chums, is that the Brexiteers were put in charge of the negotiations. So you had David Davis, hardline Brexiteer, as the first negotiator. I mean, he didn't do an awful lot of work, but when he did turn up, he discovered that Michel Barnier was very well briefed, and he stormed out in a huff because he couldn't deliver the deal he'd promised. And then you had Dominic Raab coming in, and he was confronted by reality too, so he stormed out in a huff. Now, as well, that's the problem for the Brexiteers. When they're put in charge, they can't deliver.
Okay. Well, the woman in charge
Ollie Robbins is in charge. The civil service is in charge. 2/3 of the cabinet pack remain. And what you've seen, the Brexit secretaries completely usurped by the civil service. We haven't even attempted a free trade deal. I mean, the whole thing has been a complete charade by a prime minister who never really wanted us to leave. So, the failure here is not Brexit itself. It's the Prime Minister and her cabinet. The sooner she's gone, the better. We've got a chance here today for a fresh start, for a leader that believes in Brexit. And if we get somebody with courage and conviction, they will carry the country with them. And listen, I've got to run, but thank you.